Hey, lady, this is Special Forces training, not yoga class. The young recruits burst into laughter as they watched the petite woman step onto the training ground. She said nothing, just stood at the back of the line wearing black gloves. When she pulled off those gloves, a faded black tattoo appeared. The colonel, who had been sitting, immediately stood up, his voice trembling. Black Viper. Only one person ever survived. It's you. The entire training ground fell silent. Her name was Linnea Falk, 32 years old, European with long black hair pulled back neatly. Small frame, pale skin, sharp, cold eyes that remained silent. She had registered for the special training course, but had no outstanding background. No one knew what she had done before. The group of recruits were all confident new soldiers, always joking around. You sure you're in the right unit? This is Special Forces selection, not administration. Linnea didn't react. She silently completed the first physical fitness test without needing a break. But no one paid attention, because everyone was too busy showing off their speed. The training sergeant watched from the sidelines, shaking his head. Another office worker who thinks she can play soldier. During the obstacle course, while others struggled with the rope climb, Linnea moved with fluid precision. Her movements were too clean, too practiced. But the recruits were too focused on their own performance to notice. Did you see how she cleared that wall? One instructor whispered to another. That's not beginner technique. But the recruits continued their mockery. Maybe she watched too many action movies, they laughed. Linnea remained at the back, never speaking up, never defending herself. She simply observed everything with those cold, calculating eyes. During the lunch break, she sat alone, eating her rations methodically. The other recruits gathered in groups, still making jokes about the quiet office lady who somehow ended up in their program. What they didn't notice was how she held her knife, not like someone eating, but like someone who knew exactly how to use it. The afternoon brought weapons familiarity training. When handed a standard-issue rifle, Linnea's hands moved with muscle memory. Check the action, inspect the barrel, test the trigger pull, all in seconds. Interesting, muttered the weapons instructor. Very interesting. But the recruits were too busy competing with each other to see the way she handled the weapon, like it was an extension of her body. CTA Comment Act 1. Have you ever seen a good person being looked down upon? Type, so unfair. During the simulated survival test, she was the only one who didn't ask any questions. When the entire team was surrounded by a fake ambush, Linnea led a small group to escape precisely through a route few knew about, a trail along the creek. One instructor recognized something strange. Only someone who's had night forest combat training at black level would know that path. The next day, when she tried the pistol shooting, hand position, release, breath control, aim, almost identical to ghost operatives. Someone in the center opened a deleted file, Black Viper, a top-secret unit ambushed 7 years ago, total loss, no survivors. But the classified file had a hidden note, Survivor 1, female, identity classified. The training continued, but now some instructors were watching Linnea more carefully. Her movements during combat drills were too refined, too lethal. She wasn't learning, she was remembering. During a night navigation exercise, the recruits got lost in the woods. Linnea found them within an hour, using tracking methods that weren't taught in basic training. How did you know we were there? Asked one confused recruit. You left sign, she replied simply. Broken branches, heel prints in soft earth, boot polish on tree bark. The lead instructor pulled up classified databases that night. Black Viper had been an elite reconnaissance unit, deep penetration missions, high-value target elimination. They operated in cells of 8. 7 years ago, Unit Black Viper had gone dark during Operation Nightfall. Official reports, complete unit loss, no survivors, mission classified. But there were inconsistencies. Body count didn't match. One member's remains were never found. The instructor stared at Linnea's registration photo. No last name in the system matched any Black Viper records, but something about her eyes. During the next day's hand-to-hand combat training, Linnea paired with the largest recruit, a former rugby player who outweighed her by 80 pounds. "Go easy on the lady," he laughed. 3 seconds later, he was on the ground, arm twisted behind his back, unable to move. Linnea helped him up without a word. The instructor who had been researching walked over. "Where did you learn that technique?" "I read books," she said quietly. "But that move, the precise angle, the leverage point, it was from a classified manual, Military Combatives Level 5. The kind of training that took years to master. CTA Comment Act 2. If you've ever been judged wrong because of your appearance, type 'I understand that feeling.'" The final test was shooting targets in an emergency situation with temporary blindfolding. Linnea stepped forward. No one cared. But in just 43 seconds, 6 shots all hit center mass, in a serpentine pattern. One instructor exclaimed, "That's ghost pattern. Only exists in Black Viper." Linnea removed her gloves, adjusted her sleeves, revealing a faded black tattoo, a viper snake coiled around the number 7. The colonel supervising the training session approached. He stopped, looked at her for a long time, then whispered, "Only one person survived, and you came back. Why? For glory? Or so others won't get lost like you once did?" The training ground was dead silent. Every recruit, every instructor, every observer stopped what they were doing. The colonel's voice carried the weight of classified knowledge, of operations that never made it into official reports. "Black Viper," he continued, his voice barely audible. "Operation Nightfall. The unit that went into hell and only one came back." Linnea's expression didn't change, but her hands, those steady, precise hands, trembled slightly. "I remember the report," the colonel said. 8 went in, 7 bodies recovered, 1 listed as missing, presumed dead. But you weren't dead, were you? The recruits who had been mocking her hours earlier stood frozen. They began to understand they had been laughing at someone who had survived what killed an entire elite unit. The extraction point was compromised. Linnea spoke for the first time all day, her voice quiet but clear. "Enemy knew we were coming. My team. They fought to give me a chance to complete the mission." "And you did," the colonel nodded. "The intelligence you brought back saved 3 other operations, but officially, you died with your unit." One of the recruits stepped forward. "Ma'am, we didn't know." Linnea looked at him with those cold eyes that had seen too much. "You weren't supposed to know. That was the point." The colonel gestured to the training ground. "So why are you here? Why risk exposure?" Linnea replied, "I only came back to remind people that survival isn't about luck. It's about responsibility." She looked at the young recruits, these confident soldiers who thought they knew what war was. "You think Special Forces training is about being the strongest, the fastest, the best shot. But it's not. It's about bringing everyone home. My team didn't survive because I was better than them. They didn't survive because I failed them." The weight of 7 years of survivors' guilt filled the silence. "Every person who dies under your command is a failure you carry forever. Every mission you complete means nothing if you lose people who trusted you to bring them home." She turned to leave, then paused. "That's why I'm here. Not to prove I'm the best, but to make sure you understand what best really means before you get people killed learning it." CTA Comment, Act 3. If you've ever known someone who survived and then quietly helped others, right, they deserve respect. Linnea didn't stay for the rest of the training course. She just left behind a corrected tactical diagram and one sentence: "Next time if you get lost, don't follow the bright path." The colonel had the training area chart redesigned. Loss doesn't teach people to be strong. It teaches people to live right, so others don't have to suffer loss. She left in silence, no medals, no ceremony. But from that day forward, anyone who saw the Black Viper tattoo bowed their head in respect. The recruits who had mocked her never spoke of that day, but they trained harder, studied more, and always looked out for their teammates. The weapons instructor kept the target she had shot, the serpentine pattern that only Black Viper operatives knew. He used it in advanced classes not to show off technique, but to remind students that precision without purpose was meaningless. The colonel added a new section to the training manual. The responsibility of survival is ensuring others don't have to survive what you did. Months later, when the first class of new Special Forces operators graduated, they all carried something different. Not just skills, not just strength, but understanding. One graduate wrote in his journal, "We learned that the person who teaches you the most might be the quietest one in the room, the one who has nothing left to prove, but everything to give." The training facility added a memorial wall, 7 names from Black Viper. No 8th name because officially there was no 8th member. But sometimes late at night, instructors would find flowers placed at the base of the memorial. Always 7 flowers, never 8. And everyone knew who left them. CTA Comment Act 4. Type, "I will live kindly," if you believe the quietest person is the one who survived the deepest. Linnea didn't come to prove anything at all. She only came, so no one else would have to get lost where she once was. Some people survive their past, but carry the responsibility with them. They don't need recognition. They don't need glory. They just need to know someone else won't be left behind because of them. Live with kindness, because you never know. The person next to you, quiet, small, might be someone carrying an entire unit on their shoulders for 7 years. The strongest people are often the ones who say the least. They've learned that true strength isn't about what you can do. It's about what you choose not to do. They've learned that survival isn't a gift. It's a burden that becomes meaningful only when you use it to help others survive too. In a world that celebrates the loudest voices, remember to listen to the quiet ones. They might be the ones who have already walked through hell and came back not to brag about it, but to make sure you never have to go there. 3 months after Linnea disappeared from the training facility, something changed in the Special Forces community. The recruits from that day had spread the story, not the classified details, but the lesson. Word traveled through military circles about the quiet woman who had humbled an entire training class without raising her voice. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, one of the recruits who had mocked her, found himself in Afghanistan 6 months later. His unit was pinned down, surrounded, with no clear extraction route. In that moment of terror, he remembered Linnea's words, "Don't follow the bright path." Instead of taking the obvious route that would have led them into an ambush, he guided his team along a hidden creek bed. All 8 soldiers made it home alive. Chen never forgot that lesson. Years later, as a training instructor himself, he would tell his students, "The most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting orders. It's the one who's already survived everything you're afraid of." Back at the original training facility, the colonel established a new tradition. Every graduating class would receive a small metal pin, a simple snake coiled around the number 7, not as a badge of honor, but as a reminder. A reminder that true strength comes from lifting others up, not putting them down. A reminder that the person you underestimate might be the one who saves your life. A reminder that survival means nothing if you don't use it to help others survive too. The pin came with one rule. If you ever met someone who needed help, someone who was lost or struggling, you were required to help them. No questions asked. Because somewhere out there, a woman named Linnea Falk was still carrying the weight of 7 names, 7 friends who didn't make it home. And the best way to honor their sacrifice was to make sure no one else had to carry that weight alone.